Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be watching a video called Even Small Towns Are Great Here, 5 Years in the Netherlands. I'm guessing this is a video about someone that moved to the Netherlands and they're obviously not from there. I'm gonna maybe say they're from the USA, but obviously I have no idea. And it says like even small towns are great, and I'm guessing it's because I think something that tends to happen in a lot of like bigger countries is that, you know, like everything works great, everything works perfectly, like in the bigger cities, in the capital and the bigger cities in general. And the more like rural you get, the lesser like the services start to work less and less, and stuff like doesn't really work as great as in the capital. I think that's quite common all over the world, and maybe that's why they are saying like, no, in the Netherlands, even if you are in a smaller town, not just, you know, like Amsterdam or The Hague or Rotterdam or some like bigger cities, like you're gonna like everything's gonna be incredibly perfect. That's what I think, but I don't know. So let's check it out and comment, like, subscribe, and start.
We've lived in the Netherlands for 5 years now, and during that time we've been to many different cities and towns. Now, obviously I talk about Amsterdam a lot on this channel because that's the city I live in, but I routinely show clips from other places that I've been to in the country. A lot of the time, I didn't go to these places specifically to film them. They were just some of the places I had to go because I was going to an appointment or visiting friends or just living my life. And while I grabbed a few video clips here and there, I never collected enough footage to make a complete video about any of these places, especially in the early days. But a lot of these places are really interesting, and I think you'll find them interesting too, because one of the things that really honestly just blew me away after moving to the Netherlands is just how good things are pretty much everywhere.
In what capacity?
When we got to the Netherlands, we tried to get out of the city as much as possible to get to know our new country. Before I had a YouTube channel, I used to take photos or videos of things I found interesting, and it's really funny to look back on a lot of what I thought was worth filming. Most of these videos are too short as they were never meant to be posted to YouTube, so you'll have to excuse me if I have to loop some of them. So anyway, let's begin. We have visited the city of Haarlem several times, both before moving to the Netherlands and after, as it's an easy trip from Amsterdam by train. Visiting Haarlem for the first time was a really eye-opening experience for me, as it was the first time I realized that even a city of about 160,000 people could be really active and lively, and I talked about that in the very first video on this channel. My hometown has over 3 times the population, and you'd need a 50-car pileup to see this many people outside of their cars at one time. This is entirely because of the design of Haarlem and its pedestrianized city center.
Yeah, but there's a lot
I took our kids to Leiden to visit the Natural History Museum, again, trivially easy to access by train and a short walk.
Love it.
This is literally the only video I took of Leiden, this crosswalk. This amazed me because it was such a safe crossing, where the street was narrowed with this big pedestrian island. Oh, okay. I was clearly easily impressed in those early days, but seriously, this would not exist in any city this size in Canada, and that's really sad, right?
He's Canadian.
I did a similar thing in the town of Harlingen, where the only video I took was this one. Again, of a safe crosswalk. In this case, the crossing is raised to slow down drivers. If you live in Canada, you have to get all your neighbors together and fight for years to get something like this installed, but in the Netherlands, they're just all over the place, and
it's just a norm.
Usually installed by default. For a while, we were attending some speed cubing competitions. This meant that we had to travel to some very random places in the Netherlands. This is Lent, which is basically a suburb of Nijmegen. We hadn't been in the Netherlands for long at this point, so everything was new to us. I remember it being so amazing that we could so easily take a train to the other side of the country, and when we got there, it was safe for our whole family, including our kids, to cycle by themselves to the neighboring town.
By themselves?
There was also this separated bicycle path that I remember thinking was really high quality, especially in such a small city. This bridge was really cool too, and it was interesting how they cut through this old tower to build this bicycle path.
It looks very modern.
I'm thinking that only the Netherlands would care enough about bicycle infrastructure to do this.
It's true.
The other fascinating thing about Lent was that it felt very suburban with lots of single-family
suburb.
homes, but it was still perfectly safe to cycle through, and there were so many families out on bicycles. These kind of suburban streets cut off to through traffic by cars are ideal routes for cycling without having to build any dedicated cycling infrastructure at all.
It's true.
There are no bike lanes needed here because the speed and volume of cars was so low.
Yeah.
Suburban streets lined with single-family homes but still safe for cycling just absolutely blew our minds.
Yeah.
Another speed cubing competition was in Ermelo. Again, our destination in this small town was easily accessible by train plus bicycle. What amazed me was that a town this small, 27,000 people, would have so many trains going to it, and with a ridiculous amount of bicycles parked out front. The other thing that surprised me was the traffic calming. That's the infrastructure that's used to slow and restrict car traffic. So many streets were cut off to car traffic, and again, it was easy to cycle everywhere without any dedicated cycling infrastructure. I talked about this in one of my very early videos about traffic calming on this channel. This one little town had more traffic calming measures than I've seen in literally any city of any size in Canada. And when it comes to small towns in Canada, they're all extremely car-centric. They are legitimately terrible places to be, despite them being small enough to easily cycle from one end to the other.
But yeah, there's no infrastructure.
Being in a small town that wasn't lined with strip malls and overrun by cars was just incredible. It really became clear to me that to make a place friendly for cycling, it was more important to restrict cars than it was to build a bunch of expensive bicycle infrastructure.
Okay.
After all,
will make sense.
Protected bike lanes are really just an extension of car infrastructure, right? You don't need bike paths if you don't have a lot of cars.
That's true.
We also attended a speed cubing competition in Veenendaal. This town deserves its own video someday, as it's often considered to be the best city for cycling in the Netherlands.
Probably in the world.
The exit to the train station is right at this nice cycling path, and it connects directly to this pedestrianized shopping center. Totally accessible by foot or by bicycle, without ever interacting with any cars at all.
It's so pretty.
And this isn't even the main train station. This is the suburban station in a place with only 65,000 people. Like, I would absolutely never see this in Canada anywhere, never mind the suburbs of a small city. We took a vacation to Terschelling, an island in the North Sea. I was amazed that we could take a train directly to the ferry, and when we got to the island, we could rent e-bikes and cycle everywhere. We were even staying on a farm, like an actual rural farm, and it was still easily accessible by separated paths that were only used by bicycles and tractors.
That's insane to me.
This country never ceases to amaze me. We went on vacation to a small camping area outside of Ommen. Again, small town, 18,000 people. Obviously, a lot of people drive here, but there are still alternatives for walking and cycling. I drove around to take a look at the town and saw traffic calming everywhere. Look at the traffic calming on this main residential street. There is no way this would exist in a town this small in North America. This street would be wide and straight, high speed, and have lots of cars.
Yeah.
People would have signs on their lawns telling drivers to slow down, and nobody would let their kids out in the street.
All those
It's
stop
just
signs.
a totally different way to design a residential area. I was also surprised at how good the new road infrastructure was. You can see a very clear separation between streets and roads. There are no stroads here. For example, the businesses in this industrial area were accessible by streets separated from the main road.
It's so pretty as well.
Roundabout. I talked about this in more detail in my video about stroads. Of course, there was a train station with a huge amount of bicycles outside of it.
What's up with the bikes?
Again, this would just never exist in North America in a town this size. We also stayed at a campground near Diepenheim, and I had to drive there to buy groceries. I think this place surprised me the most because less than 3,000 people live here. And yet there were lovely houses on small streets, a traffic calming, of course,
this is like one family.
And people of all ages cycling everywhere. What was even crazier was the time we ended up in Jutrijp. There was nice traffic calming everywhere. We saw lots of people cycling, but I really wanted to film this because it's a great example of rural transit in the Netherlands.
What's that?
A bus stop with a bicycle rack so that people can cycle to the bus stop. And this bus stop has
What?
buses that come every 12 minutes. And get this, for a village of
With 3,000 people?
265 people. I
Oh
know
my
cities
God.
1,000 times that size in Canada that have less frequent bus service.
Of course, yes.
We took our kids to the Bonami Computer Museum in Zwolle. This is on the edge of the city, about 4 kilometers from the train station, but it was still trivially easy and safe to get to by bicycle. The population of Zwolle is about 120,000 people. It was amazing to us how even these places in a random business park at the edge of a small town were still accessible to us with a train plus bicycle combination.
Everything.
I had never seen anything like this before. Also, the computer museum is amazing. You should go if you're nearby.
It looks very cool.
We stayed for a few days at a campground near Ussen, so I took a drive into town to check it out. Of course, I was able to easily pick up an Ofe Fiets rental bicycle from the bicycle parking
What's
garage
up
at
with
the
the
train
bikes?
station. I wanted to
So
come
many
here
bikes.
because David Hembro, a British blogger who runs the blog A View from the Cycle Path, lives in Ussen and talks about it a lot. It was again an absolutely lovely small city, and it was really pleasant to walk around. And there were lots of nice residential neighborhoods all over. Of course, the cycling infrastructure was absolutely top-notch, despite it being a city of less than 70,000 people.
What if they're both
One
bikes
of
and
the
cars are at the
suburbs of
same time?
Ussen, called Kloosterveen, looked cool on the map, so I decided to cycle out there. Of course, it was always perfectly safe and comfortable, and there were many other people out cycling as well for all kinds of
course.
trips. I just couldn't believe how good a small city could be. Kloosterveen itself was also really nice, despite it being a modern development. There was a mix of housing types, including single-family homes, and they were all connected by car-free walking and cycling paths. The crazy-looking circle thing was a pedestrianized center with underground parking and apartments,
What's
and
that?
all the shops you'd need on a regular basis. This proved to me once again that modern suburban neighborhoods don't have to be car-centric and crappy.
Yeah.
I do think that Ussen should have a tram line, though. Its public transportation is decent, but it's only buses. While we were driving
Well-
back to Amsterdam, we wanted to stop at a grocery store, so we went to this random neighborhood called Vathorst outside of Amersfoort. Again, totally blown away.
So many
at this
bikes. and
place.
It's crazy.
This is as suburban as it gets, right off the highway, but there was a traffic calming, a nice little shopping area that's within walking distance of houses. I meant to come back to film this, but I never did. But it really shows that good urbanism is everywhere in the Netherlands, even in new developments.
Yeah.
It's not just reserved for a handful of old neighborhoods in the biggest cities like it is
It's
in Canada.
everywhere.
We decided to spend a few days in the town of Woerden because it looked nice. I'm starting to sound like a broken record here, but again, it was absolutely wonderful. There were pedestrianized streets all over the city center and lots of people out. There were modern developments that were extremely pleasant, and no giant stroads, no sprawling parking lots, and
No.
the train station was really nice too.
Is that the train
It had
station? It's
big outdoor
beautiful.
parking lot for bicycles, as well as one indoors,
Oh
and
my
more
God,
on the other
so
side
many.
too. And of course, regular train service, despite it being a town of about 50,000 people. Like, coming from Canada, this was crazy. A family friend came to visit us in the Netherlands. She had Dutch heritage, and we went to see some of her extended family. This brought us to Snake, an absolutely lovely old town of about 35,000 people. They lived in this pretty typical Dutch suburban neighborhood, and it was really
Very
nice.
suburban.
The row houses were well kept, the streets were safe and narrow, and there were lots of things within easy walking and cycling distance. Of course, there was this nice little train station with a ridiculous number of bicycles parked out front. The city center of Snake is pedestrianized, and it's a genuinely wonderful place to be. We went out on a boat and sailed through the
But that's
canals.
beautiful.
I just couldn't believe that a small town could be this nice. As a point of reference, this is what downtown looks like in a similarly sized city in Canada, and I always assumed that this is what all small towns were like.
Yeah.
I could never have imagined that a small town could have a pedestrianized city center before coming to the Netherlands. And yet, They're everywhere here. We also visited her extended family in Alkmaar, a city with a population of about 100,000 people, and I was absolutely amazed. This was a neighborhood of single-family homes in a relatively small city, and yet it didn't have massively wide streets with high-speed cars. It was quiet and boring, just like a suburb is supposed to be, but it was also perfectly safe to walk and cycle. And it was directly connected to a local park with a network of separated bicycle paths that could take you anywhere else within the city. We saw so many kids out playing together and without any parents around. This is just a better way to design a suburb.
It is.
I was doing a contract in the town of Zeist, so I had to travel there every week. I'm going to make a full video about this because it was the nicest modern train station I think I've ever seen. Like, this is ridiculous, right? A town of 65,000 people in Canada wouldn't even have a train station anymore, never mind one that looked like this. This is just a small sample of the places we went to in our first few years in the Netherlands. There are many other places that we've been to, and I've talked about many of them on this channel already. I have another YouTube channel where I live stream my bicycle rides, and these live streams show a totally unfiltered view of what it's like to cycle in the Netherlands.
That's gorgeous.
I started doing these rides because I wanted people to see what it's really like here in between the places I choose to film. And it's nice pretty much everywhere. And that's like really what I want to make clear to people. Because what really struck me about going to all these random places, from industrial parks to suburban neighborhoods to small towns, was that none of them were bad. Sure, some places were better than others, and there are certainly lots of places that could benefit from better public transit. But I have yet to see any place in any city, town, or village in the Netherlands where I felt uncomfortable or unsafe to be outside of a car. And yet, when I think back to my time in Canada, I would go to places that I would call bad on a regular basis. And anytime I had to leave my neighborhood without driving, I just expected to feel unsafe several times. And literally any time I had to go to a location in a suburb or a small town, I absolutely had to drive. And I was surrounded by garbage like this most of the time. What's funny is that after a few years of living in the Netherlands, my idea of bad has shifted. For example, I absolutely hate Zijlstraat in Amsterdam, and I avoid it whenever possible.
What's that?
In Canada, this would be considered one of the good places. This is what motivates me to keep making videos on this channel. I want people to understand that I'm not just seeking out the best parts of the Netherlands to highlight while ignoring the bad parts. There are no bad parts. Or if there are, they're so few and far between that I haven't seen them. A great example is my video about this business park by the airport. I just could not believe that a business park by the airport could be easily transit accessible, safe for walking and cycling, and even nice looking.
And that's near the airport? This
random business park in Amsterdam with a beautiful two-way bicycle path running right through the middle of it. I spent huge parts of my life going to business parks in multiple US and Canadian cities. They all sucked. All of them, without exception.
He sounds disgusted.
I always assumed that's just what they were like, and yet apparently they don't have to be. And the same goes for small towns. I hated small towns in Canada. They always looked like garbage with giant parking lots and a high-speed strode running right through the center of town. And yet here, the small towns were lovely, and they were usually easily accessible by public transit. And they almost always had some kind of pedestrianized area. 5 years of living in the Netherlands has changed me forever. I can absolutely never go back to the life I had before. And the other great thing about living here for 5 years is that I'm allowed to apply for a Dutch passport, which is great because after traveling the world, I finally found the place I want to live, and I have absolutely no intention of ever going back.
That's nice.
I'd like to thank my supporters on Nebula and Patreon who pay me to walk down memory lane. If you'd like to support the channel, visit nebula.tv/notjustbikes or patreon.com/notjustbikes.
Okay, so I got it wrong. He was not from the US. He was Canadian. And yeah, I'm super shocked. I love that he sounds like so horrified by how things are in Canada. And I guess to a certain point in the United States, because he did mention that he also traveled a lot to the USA, but his point of reference is Canada because that's where he's from. But it's funny that he sounds like absolutely horrified by how the way things are. But I think I like what he said about, when that's all like, of course, everything's gonna be like, you're gonna be like, wow, I can't believe, like, you just assume that everything is the way you think it is because that's the only thing you know. So of course that's the only thing you know. You're gonna be thinking like, oh, this is the normal, like this is what happens all over the world. When I think, it's not. It doesn't have to be that way. But also I think I have, like he mentions, obviously, like the Netherlands, I think, like, obviously all the things, it's great, like the public transport, the bike system, like it's mind-blowing. But I do have to say that I think it's more like the Netherlands, I think, is probably the exception and not the rule. Not just in Canada and not just in North America. I would assume like almost like everything, because like from what I've known, from what I've seen, I think like the Netherlands, it's like, no, it's not normal. It's not normal for all the other countries in the world to be like this. I think you're the exception. You're not the rule. So I do have to say, you know what, it's great, but it's not normal. I think it's an outlier when it comes to like incredible like car management. I don't even know, like is it car management, road transportation? I don't know, but I think they are probably the only ones that are doing it like that. Because even though when you think like a city that has great bike paths and it's great for cyclists and you think like, oh well, it's good and it has like good public transport, you don't actually need a car. I don't think it's in that level that we've seen in the Netherlands. I think like, well, even if you think like in your wildest dreams, you're thinking, oh, it's great, like don't worry about it. It's like, well, here, but you really do have to see like the thing how it's in the Netherlands because it's crazy. And like he said, I like that he was like, oh, a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, I'm just showing like the good parts, and then for you to be like, oh yeah, it sounds great, but probably it's not like that all over the country. And it's like, no, seriously, it's like that all over the country, which I'm super shocked by, because like he said, I'm so shocked by like the smaller, I think that like the cities are tiny, well, not cities, they're towns, they're tiny towns of like 200,000 people or even less. They're tiny towns, and they look they look beautiful, by the way. Like they don't look, again, because of what I was saying at the beginning, like I think rural parts usually tend to be, well, just rural, so they usually get a lot of like less money, like when it comes to funding and stuff. So they look, I'm not saying they look uglier, but they just look less developed. Maybe that's the right term. But in this case, they looked perfect. Like the roads were in perfect state. They had like all the bikes were there. Like it looks like any other town, like any other city. And it's like, no, it's just like, I don't know, 50,000 people live here. And it's like, wait, what did you say? It's crazy to me. And it's mind blowing that they also have like the bus passes through like every 16 minutes or something. It's like, it's such a tiny town. I think that's like unheard of, at least. I don't know, like for my perspective, I think that's unheard of, like to have such a small town and for like, there's buses that pass regularly. I'm like, what? That's really like, that's a foreign concept to me, because I'm like, no, that doesn't really happen. So I'm glad that, oh, apparently in the Netherlands it happens. But again, I'm thinking it's just in the Netherlands. I don't think that's common anywhere else in the world. And I'm so like, again, it's so like incredible. I don't know how they sort of like they adapted this, like they adapted all these towns. Have they always been like this? And what made them like that? Because again, it's an outlier. So I'm wondering, like, did they just make the switch at some point in history, or are the Dutch have always been like, no, like we have to put the emphasis on bikes and not just on cars. And also, again, it's like city development and city planning. Maybe it's always been like that, because I think it's probably harder once you have like your city planning and stuff to change stuff. Like you really can't do that. So I'm guessing it's been like that since always. And I'm wondering like what made them like that, and how come other countries do not have that. And I do have to say, I'm super shocked by, seriously, you hear like, oh, the Netherlands, they have a lot of bikes. But no, seeing it like this and the reality of it and the clips of it, it's like, no, you guys weren't kidding. Like it's full of bikes in an insane amount that it's so funny. Like there was like an intersection, and in any other place in the world, in any other town in the world, in any other city, like you would see cars obviously passing through because again it's like an intersection, and here it's just like bikes. It's just like one bike after the other. It's so funny. And also the amount of, I don't understand the amount of parking. Why do they have parking in the train stations and in the bus stations? It's because you can just leave your bike and then you can just take the bus and take the train and then you'll walk over there in your destination. Why wouldn't you take your bike? Or you can just rent another bike? I'm a little confused by that fact and how come it's normal and they have it everywhere. Because I'm like, well, but if you're carrying your bike, like, wouldn't you want your bike to the place you're going? Because how are you going to move around in the city that you're going to? But maybe it's because no, you'll move around in like public transport. Because again, it's great, or you'll walk maybe. I don't know, but it sounds good. But I would love to know more. And also, I love the city centers that are pedestrianized. I think that's so lovely. I love that. I love when a city center and when downtown is like that, and you can just walk around. I think that's great. And I've been in places that are like that, and I think more cities should probably implement that because it's so nice that you get that. Although usually I've seen it in just a few streets. Is not normally all downtown. It's just a few like blocks that you get that. But apparently in the Netherlands, it's all the towns have this, and I only seen it in like, well, in some cities and not just like all the cities like in the country. But I love it. That was great, and I want to know more about like how the bike system, how the bikes actually work in the Netherlands. But that was it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.